The morning sun cast long shadows across the Arecibo 2 facility as Taemin Park sat at his workstation, sipping his third cup of coffee and monitoring the deep space communication arrays. He had been doing this job for 5 years now, and most days were the same routine of checking signals, running diagnostics, and filing reports that nobody seemed to read. The coffee mug was halfway to his lips when the primary console started beeping with an urgent pattern he had never heard before. Taemin set down his mug and leaned forward, watching as data streamed across his screens in patterns that made his heart race. This was not random cosmic noise or equipment malfunction. This was a structured transmission from deep space. The signal was strong and clearly artificial, originating from a star system roughly 47 light-years away. Taemin's hands moved quickly across his keyboard as he began the standard first contact protocols that every communications officer had memorized, but never expected to use. His supervisor had always joked that these procedures were just paperwork nobody would ever need. As the computer worked to decode the transmission, Taemin felt his pulse quicken. He had dreamed of this moment since he was a child watching science fiction movies with his father. Real aliens were trying to talk to Earth, and he was the first human to receive their message. The translation algorithms finished their work, and Taemin read the decoded message on his screen. His eyes widened as he read it again, then a third, time to make sure he understood correctly. The message was not what anyone had expected from humanity's first contact with alien intelligence. Greetings, primitive species of the third planet. We are the Valdari Confederation, masters of 12 star systems and keepers of ancient wisdom. After many cycles of observation, we have determined that your species has reached sufficient development to warrant our attention. We extend to you the great honor of joining the galactic community as a protected client race under our benevolent guidance. You should feel grateful for this opportunity, as few species are deemed worthy of our protection. Prepare your world leaders to receive our delegation and learn the proper ways of civilized spacefaring peoples. The Valdari await your humble acceptance of our generous offer. Taemin stared at the message for a long moment, then did something that would have horrified his training instructors. He started laughing. The sound echoed through the quiet communications center as he imagined how his colleagues would react to aliens who thought they were doing humanity a favor. Still chuckling, Taemin forwarded the message to Dr. So-Young Kim at the Seoul Xenobiology Institute. So-Young was Earth's leading expert on theoretical alien contact scenarios and had spent her career preparing for exactly this situation. She was also one of the few people who knew the real truth about Earth's place in the galaxy. Doctor Kim was in her laboratory when she received Taemin's transmission. She opened the file expecting another routine deep space survey report, but when she read the Valdari message, she had to sit down. The alien transmission was so perfectly condescending and self-important that it could have been written as a comedy sketch. So Young immediately called her supervisor, Director Juan Lee of the Department of Galactic Affairs. Juan was a serious man who rarely showed emotion, but when So-Young read him the Valdari message, she could hear him trying not to laugh on the other end of the phone. "They think they're offering us protection?" Juan asked, his voice carefully controlled. 12 star systems? And they think they're the big players in this neighborhood? Should we tell them the truth right away, or let them figure it out gradually? So-Young asked, already knowing what the answer would be. The Department of Galactic Affairs had very specific protocols for situations like this. Standard procedure, Juan replied. Let them learn the easy way first. Draft a response using Protocol 7 and see how they react. If they're reasonable, we can guide them through integration slowly. If they're not, he paused. Well, we have other protocols for that too. So-Young spent the next hour crafting Earth's response to the Valdari Confederation. She chose her words carefully, following guidelines that had been developed over many decades of experience with species who thought they were making first contact with a primitive world. The response she sent was professionally polite, but subtly formal. The government of Earth acknowledges receipt of your communication and your interest in establishing diplomatic relations with our world. We appreciate your desire to include Earth in galactic affairs. Please submit your formal credentials and diplomatic authorization through the appropriate channels so that we may assign a qualified representative to your case. We look forward to productive discussions about trade agreements, cultural exchange, programs, and mutual defense arrangements that will benefit both our peoples. Meanwhile, aboard the Valdari flagship Dominion's Pride, Ambassador Kelthrin read Earth's response with growing confusion. The primitive humans had not responded with the gratitude and excitement he had expected. Instead, their message sounded almost bureaucratic, as if they dealt with alien contact on a regular basis. "Commander Vexhai," Kelthrin called to his military advisor, "read this response from the humans and tell me what you think." Vexhai studied the message carefully. "It seems very formal, sir, almost as if they have established procedures for this type of communication. That should not be possible for a species that has never had contact with galactic civilization." "My thoughts exactly," Kelthrin replied. "They mention trade agreements and defense arrangements as if they already understand these concepts. How could an isolated species know about such things?" The two Valdari officers discussed the strange response for hours. Every analysis they ran suggested that Earth's message was written by people who understood galactic politics and diplomacy. This contradicted everything they knew about human development based on their long-range observations. Perhaps they are more advanced than "Our scouts reported," Vexhai suggested. "Our last survey of their system was conducted nearly 1,000 years ago. They might have developed faster than we anticipated." Kelthrin considered this possibility. Even so, they should still be grateful for our offer of protection. No newly spacefaring species could possibly have the resources to defend themselves against the dangers of the galaxy. They must not understand what we are offering them. This reasoning satisfied both officers, and they decided that the humans simply needed to see the Valdari in person to understand the magnitude of the opportunity being presented to them. A face-to-face meeting would surely clear up any misunderstandings and allow the humans to properly appreciate their good fortune. "Prepare the diplomatic fleet," Kelthrin ordered. "We will travel to their world and explain the situation properly. Once they see our ships and understand our power, they will realize how generous our offer truly is." Back on Earth, Huan Li received confirmation that the Valdari were preparing to send a delegation to Sol System. He immediately contacted Admiral Jinwoo Choi of the Sol Defense Fleet and Ambassador Yejin Nam of the Department of Minor Species Relations. "We have visitors coming," Huan informed them during their secure video conference. "A species called the Valdari, who think they're doing us a favor by offering protection. They control 12 systems and believe this makes them a major galactic power." Admiral Choi smiled slightly. 12 systems. How quaint. Should we give them the standard newcomer welcome, or do they need the full treatment? "Start with standard protocols," Huan decided, "but be ready to escalate if they prove difficult." "Ambassador Nam, I'm assigning this to your department since they clearly qualify as a minor species seeking integration." Yejin nodded. "I'll prepare the usual orientation materials. How much do they know about galactic civilization?" "Based on their message. They think they represent galactic civilization," So Young interjected from her laboratory. "This should be interesting." As preparations began for the Valdari visit, word of the impending contact spread through the appropriate government channels. The Sol System's defensive grids were quietly activated, not as a threat, but as a precaution. Earth had learned long ago that first contact situations could become unpredictable if the visiting species had unrealistic expectations about their own importance. The Valdari diplomatic fleet entered hyperspace, confident that they were about to enlighten a primitive species and gain grateful new subjects for their confederation. They had no idea that they were actually about to receive the education of their lifetimes about the true structure of galactic power. Taemin Park continued, monitoring his communications array, but now he was watching for the Valdari fleet's approach. He wondered what the alien diplomats would think when they discovered that their generous offer to a primitive species was being handled by the same bureaucratic department that processed dozens of similar requests every year. The stage was set for a first contact scenario unlike anything the Valdari had ever imagined, and Earth was ready to provide them with a very thorough introduction to reality. The Valdari diplomatic fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of what they believed was a primitive solar system, expecting to find a single inhabited world defended by crude chemical rockets and basic orbital satellites. Ambassador Kelthrin stood on the bridge of the Dominion's Pride, gazing at the view screen with satisfaction as his 3 escort vessels took defensive positions around the flagship. "Begin the approach to the 3rd planet," Kelthron ordered his navigator. "Broadcast our arrival message on all frequencies so the humans know that the Valdari have arrived to honor them with our presence." The navigator's fingers moved across his control panel, but before he could complete the transmission, warning, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. Commander Vex-High rushed to the tactical station, where his officer was staring at readings that seemed impossible. "Sir, we have multiple contacts approaching our position," the tactical officer reported, his voice tight with confusion. "The signatures don't match any known human technology from our intelligence reports." On the main view screen, sleek vessels appeared from what had seemed like empty space, moving with precision and speed that made the Valdari ships look clumsy by comparison. These weren't the primitive craft they had expected to encounter. They were clearly advanced warships that could reduce the Valdari fleet to debris in minutes. "How many ships?" Kelthron demanded, trying to keep the shock out of his voice, counting new contacts as they decloak. "Sir, we now have 47 vessels, surrounding our formation, with more appearing every few seconds. Their weapon systems are active, but not targeting us directly. A communication channel opened without the Valdari initiating it, and a calm human voice filled the bridge. "Valdari vessels, this is Admiral Jinwoo Choi of the Seoul Defense Fleet. You are entering restricted space. Please maintain your current position while we arrange for diplomatic escort to Luna Station." Kelthron found his voice after a moment of stunned silence. "We are the Valdari diplomatic mission seeking audience with your world leaders. We were not informed that you possessed such extensive defensive capabilities. All visitors are escorted through Sol's system for security reasons," Admiral Choi replied matter-of-factly. "Please stand by for your diplomatic escort." The largest human vessel approached the Valdari formation, and Kelthron realized with growing unease that this single ship was nearly twice the size of his entire fleet combined. The vessel's hull bore markings in what appeared to be human script, and its design suggested technology far beyond what the Valdari possessed. "Sir," Vex-High whispered urgently, "our sensors indicate that every human ship in this formation could destroy our flagship with a single weapon discharge. Their shielding technology alone is generations ahead of our best designs." As they were guided through the Sol system, the Valdari crew watched in amazement at the infrastructure surrounding them. Massive orbital stations ringed several planets, and the asteroid belt had been converted into what appeared to be an enormous mining and manufacturing complex. Traffic flowed constantly between installations, not just human ships, but vessels of designs they had never seen before. "Commander," the navigation officer called out, "I'm detecting multiple alien signatures among the civilian traffic. These appear to be ships from dozens of different species, all operating normally within human space." Kelthron studied the tactical displays showing the various alien vessels moving freely through the Sol system. Some of the ship designs were familiar from ancient Valdari historical records of species that had vanished from their region of space thousands of years ago. Others were completely unknown, suggesting contact with civilizations from far beyond Valdari exploration range. "How is this possible?" Kelthron muttered. "Our intelligence reports indicated that humans had never achieved faster-than-light travel. They should not have any contact with other species, let alone be hosting what appears to be a major interstellar trade hub." Their destination became visible as they approached Earth's moon. Luna Station was a gleaming metropolis in space, larger than most Valdari planetary capitals. Hundreds of docking bays accommodated vessels of every conceivable design, while massive cargo transporters moved goods between the station and the planet below. The human escort guided them to a diplomatic docking bay that could have housed their entire fleet with room to spare. As they disembarked, Kelthron and his delegation found themselves in a reception area that displayed wealth and technology that made their own confederation's greatest achievements look. Primitive Ambassador Ye Jin Nam waited to greet them, dressed in formal diplomatic attire and flanked by an honor guard in uniforms that seemed to incorporate advanced materials the Valdari couldn't identify. She approached with a warm smile that somehow made Kelthron feel even more unsettled. "Welcome to Luna Station, Ambassador Kelthron," she said, offering a slight bow of respect. "I am Ambassador Nam, and I've been assigned to facilitate your visit. I understand you're interested in establishing diplomatic relations with Earth?" We are here to offer your species protection and guidance as you begin your journey into galactic civilization, Kelthrin replied, trying to maintain the dignity appropriate to his position despite his growing confusion. Yejin's smile never wavered. How thoughtful of you. I should mention that we have a comprehensive orientation program for species new to formal galactic diplomacy. Would you prefer to begin with a tour of our facilities, or shall we proceed directly to the briefing materials? The phrase, species new to formal galactic diplomacy, hit Kelthrin like a physical blow. The human ambassador was speaking to him as if the Valdari were the inexperienced ones in this situation. Before he could formulate a response, she was already guiding them through corridors filled with beings from what appeared to be dozens of different worlds. If you don't mind me asking, Vex-High said carefully, how many species maintain diplomatic relations with Earth? Oh, we have formal agreements with most inhabited systems in this galactic region, Yejin replied casually. The exact number varies depending on how you count protectorates versus full alliance members, but our current, active diplomatic roster includes representatives from about 12,000 different civilizations. Kelthrin stopped walking. 12,000? Give or take a few hundred, Yejin confirmed. We're always updating the database as new species achieve spaceflight capability. It's actually quite exciting when a civilization reaches the point where formal contact becomes appropriate. The Valdari delegation followed her into an observation lounge where massive windows provided a view of Luna Station's main traffic control area. The site below defied everything they thought they knew about galactic civilization. Ships from hundreds of different species moved in carefully coordinated patterns, guided by what was obviously a sophisticated traffic management system, ICE. Notice you seem surprised by the level of activity here, Yejin observed. Were you not briefed on current galactic trade patterns before beginning your diplomatic mission? Our intelligence indicated that humans were an isolated species with no interstellar contacts, Kelthrin admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Yejin nodded sympathetically. That's a common misconception among civilizations that haven't yet achieved full-spectrum sensor technology. Earth maintains strict protocols about revealing our presence to developing species until they demonstrate readiness for formal contact. Developing species? Vex-High repeated. But we have mastered. Faster-than-light communication and travel, we control 12 star systems. Yes, that's quite impressive for your current development level, Yejin agreed warmly. 12 systems represent solid regional authority. That actually places you well above the minimum requirements for provisional membership in the galactic community. The way she said provisional membership made it clear that the Valdari were being considered for admission to something much larger than themselves, rather than offering membership to others. Kelthrin felt his worldview beginning to crack as the implications sank in. Ambassador Nam, he said slowly, exactly how many star systems does Earth control? Yejin consulted a tablet device that materialized in her hand with technology the Valdari couldn't begin to understand. Direct administration currently covers approximately 847,000 systems, though that number fluctuates based on various factors. We also maintain defense agreements and trade partnerships throughout most of this galactic arm. The number hit the Valdari delegation like a tsunami, 847,000 systems versus their 12. Kelthrin felt dizzy as he tried to process the scale of what he was hearing. That's impossible, Vex-High stammered. No single species could administer that many worlds. The logistics alone would be beyond any conceivable government. Structure. Oh, we don't handle it all directly, Yejin explained cheerfully. Most member species maintain local autonomy under the broader framework of galactic law. Earth provides coordination, defense, and dispute resolution services, but day-to-day governance remains with local populations. It's much more efficient that way. She gestured toward the bustling station around them. What you're seeing here is really just one small part of a much larger system. Luna Station primarily handles diplomatic relations and trade coordination for this sector. Ambassador Yejin Nam watched the Valdari delegation with practiced sympathy as they struggled to process what they had learned about Earth's true position in the galaxy. She had guided dozens of species through this same revelation over her career, and she recognized the signs of civilizational shock in their expressions. I think it might be helpful if we provided you with a more comprehensive overview of galactic structure, she suggested gently. Would you be interested in taking the standard newcomer orientation tour? Kelthrin nodded weakly, no longer trusting his voice. The Valdari delegation followed Ye Jin through Luna Station's corridors, passing aliens from species they had never encountered and technologies they couldn't begin to understand. Everything they saw reinforced the growing realization that they were completely out of their depth. Their first stop was the Galactic Census Bureau, where Director Sung Ho Yoon greeted them with the patient enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoyed his work. His office walls were covered with displays showing star maps that made the Valdari's knowledge of local space look like a child's drawing. "Welcome to the Census Bureau," Sung Ho said warmly. "I understand you're interested in learning about galactic demographics and administrative structure. This is always one of my favorite parts of the orientation process." He gestured to a massive holographic display that filled the center of his office. "This shows our current administrative divisions across the galaxy. As you can see, we organize inhabited space into manageable sectors for governance purposes." The hologram showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with different regions highlighted in various colors. The scale was so vast that Kelthrin couldn't even locate the region where Valdari space was supposed to be. The blue areas represent Direct Earth Administration, Sung Ho explained, which currently includes about 847,000 star systems. The green areas are autonomous member species who maintain their own governments under galactic law. That's roughly 400,000 systems. Yellow indicates protected developing civilizations like yourselves, which covers about 900,000 systems. Vexhai stared at the display in horror. "Protected developing civilizations? Are you saying that our entire region of space is classified as underdeveloped?" "Not underdeveloped," Sung Ho corrected kindly. "Developing. There's an important difference. Your people have achieved remarkable things considering your starting point and time frame. Faster than light communication in under 50,000 years of technological development is actually quite impressive." He manipulated the hologram to zoom in on a small section of space that looked insignificant compared to the galaxy-wide view. "Here's your local region. As you can see, it's been designated as Development Zone 47C. We've been monitoring progress there for approximately 23,000 years. "Monitoring?" Kelthrin whispered. "Oh yes, we maintain observation posts throughout all development zones," Sung Ho replied matter-of-factly. "We need to track technological and social progress to determine when species are ready for formal contact. It's all part of the gradual integration protocol." The Valdari realized that everything they thought they had discovered or achieved had actually been watched and evaluated by an advanced civilization they never knew existed. Their greatest technological breakthroughs had been noted and filed away by bureaucrats in an alien government office. "How many species are there in our development zone?" Vexhai asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Sung Ho consulted his records. Development Zone 47C currently contains 137 inhabited star systems with spacefaring capability, plus about 40,000 systems with pre-spaceflight civilizations. You're actually among the more advanced groups in your zone. The number hit them like another physical blow. 137 spacefaring civilizations in their local area alone, and the Valdari had never detected any of them. They had thought they were masters of their region of space, but they were actually just one of many species stumbling around in carefully maintained isolation. Ye Jin led them to their next stop, the transportation hub, where Captain Mira Zhang of the diplomatic transport Hangang was waiting to take them on what she called a quick tour of local infrastructure. The Hangang was sleek and fast, moving through hyperspace with an ease that made Valdari FTL technology look primitive. "We'll start with a hyperspace junction," Mira explained as they traveled. "These facilitate traffic flow between major galactic regions. The one we're approaching handles about 40 million vessels per day." When they dropped out of hyperspace, the Valdari saw something that defied comprehension. A massive artificial structure stretched across space, larger than most moons, with thousands of ships moving through organized traffic lanes. The facility was clearly ancient but perfectly maintained, representing engineering capabilities far beyond anything in Valdari experience. "This junction has been operating for about 35,000 years, Mira noted casually. "It's actually one of our smaller installations. The main trunk routes handle much heavier traffic. Would you like to see a Dyson swarm next?" They traveled to a star system where the primary star was partially enclosed in an enormous shell of collectors and habitats. Billions of people lived and worked in the orbital structures, harvesting energy and resources on a scale that made entire Valdari worlds look insignificant. This particular installation supports about 70 billion residents, Mira explained. It's primarily an industrial system, but we also have research facilities and cultural centers here. The entertainment district alone is larger than most planetary cities. Du-Hyun Kang, their cultural attaché, had joined them for this portion of the tour. He specialized in helping newly contacted species understand their place in galactic civilization, and he watched the Valdari reactions with professional interest. "I know this can be overwhelming," Do-Hyun said sympathetically. "Every species goes through a period of adjustment when they realize how much larger the galaxy is than they previously understood. The important thing to remember is that size isn't everything. Every civilization contributes something valuable to the galactic community." "But how did we not know?" Kelthrin asked desperately. "How could a civilization this vast exist without us detecting any trace of it?" "That's actually by design," Do-Hyun replied. "The gradual integration protocol requires us to maintain strict information isolation around developing zones. Your people have been living in what we call a natural development environment, a carefully maintained space where you could grow and evolve without outside interference." He showed them recordings of their own star systems taken from hidden observation posts. "We've been documenting Valdari progress for millennia. Your art, your literature, your scientific achievements. They're all part of a comprehensive cultural archive that helps us understand how your species thinks and develops." The Valdari watched themselves unknowingly performing for an audience they never suspected existed. Every major moment in their history had been observed and recorded by beings who could have intervened at any time but chose to remain hidden. "Why?" Vexhai demanded. "Why not contact us sooner? Why let us struggle with problems you could have solved instantly?" "Because solving problems for other species doesn't help them grow," Do-Hyun explained patiently. "Early in galactic history, we tried direct intervention and uplifting. The results were catastrophic. Species that received advanced technology without earning it became dependent and lost their cultural identity. We learned that gradual development produces stronger, more stable civilizations." They visited a museum dedicated to failed first contacts from humanity's early period as a galactic power. The exhibits showed species that had been given too much too fast, leading to social collapse, technological stagnation, and cultural extinction. "These civilizations still exist," Do-Hyun noted sadly, "but they never recovered their sense of purpose. After being uplifted, they became eternal clients, unable to innovate or grow beyond what they were given. We swore never to repeat those mistakes." The tour continued to research facilities where teams of scientists studied thousands of developing civilizations simultaneously. The Valdari learned that their recent breakthrough in FTL communication hadn't been a discovery. It had been a carefully timed graduation present, allowed to succeed when psychological profiles indicated they were ready for the next phase of development. "Every major technological advance in your recent history was planned," Do-Hyun admitted. "We don't give you the technology directly, but we remove certain obstacles or provide subtle guidance that leads your own scientists to breakthroughs they're ready to handle." Kelthrin felt the last of his pride crumble away. "So nothing we accomplished was really our own achievement?" "That's absolutely wrong," Do-Hyun said firmly. "The achievements are entirely yours. We might remove a few roadblocks or prevent certain disasters, but the creativity, the determination, the intellectual breakthroughs, those all came from Valdari minds working on Valdari problems. We just made sure you had the chance to succeed." They returned to Luna Station as the tour ended, but the Valdari delegation was no longer the same group that had arrived with such confidence. The Museum of Galactic History occupied an entire section of Luna Station, its vast halls containing artifacts and records spanning tens of thousands of years. Chief Curator Yoonji Lim met the Valdari delegation at the entrance, her warm smile, doing little to ease the anxiety they felt about what they might learn. "Welcome to the museum," Yoonji said as she led them through corridors lined with displays from civilizations across the galaxy. "I understand you're interested in learning about the development of our current galactic order. That's one of my favorite subjects to discuss." The First hall they entered was dedicated to humanity's early expansion into space. Holographic displays showed primitive spacecraft that looked almost comically simple compared to modern vessels, but the dates accompanying them made Kelthrin's head spin. Human interstellar colonization began approximately 62,000 years ago, Yunji explained, gesturing to a display showing the first colony ships. These early vessels were quite basic by our current standards, but they represented remarkable achievements for the time period. Vexhai studied the timeline displays with growing disbelief. 62,000 years? But our historical records only go back about 40,000 years, and we've only had spaceflight for 3,000. That's perfectly normal, Yunji replied kindly. Most species don't maintain detailed historical records during their early development phases. Humanity was actually unusual in our obsession with documenting everything from the very beginning. They moved through exhibits showing humanity's gradual expansion across the galaxy. The early period was marked by conflicts and competition between different human factions, but eventually a unified government emerged that brought peace to human space. The unification wars ended about 45,000 years ago, Yunji noted, indicating a display showing massive space battles between human fleets. That marked the beginning of the modern galactic order, when humanity transitioned from expansion through conquest to growth through integration and cooperation. The exhibits showed how humanity had encountered thousands of other species during their expansion period. Some had been more advanced than early humans, others less so, but all had eventually been incorporated into what became the galactic community. The key breakthrough came when we realized that forced integration created more problems than it solved, Yunji explained. Species that were conquered or rapidly uplifted often became unstable or dependent. We learned that gradual integration produced much better results for everyone involved. Dr. Hyun-Soo An joined them as they moved into the section dedicated to the development of modern galactic governance. He specialized in the psychology of species integration and had spent decades studying how different civilizations adapted to galactic citizenship. The current system emerged from thousands of years of trial and error, Hyun-Soo explained. We tried direct rule, we tried hands-off policies, we tried rapid technological transfer, and we tried complete isolation. Each approach had serious drawbacks until we developed the gradual integration protocol. The displays showed the evolution of human policy toward newly contacted species. Early attempts at rapid integration had resulted in cultural collapse, technological stagnation, and psychological trauma for entire civilizations. The museum's exhibits included sobering records of species that had never recovered from poorly managed first contact. This is why we now maintain development zones, Hyun-Soo continued. Species need time to grow at their own pace, to develop their own solutions to problems, and to maintain their cultural identity. Our role is to provide a safe environment for that growth, not to accelerate it artificially. Kelthrin paused before a display showing psychological profiles of various species during their integration process. The graphs and charts tracked everything, from technological adoption rates to cultural adaptation patterns, representing decades of careful study for each civilization. Do you have profiles like this for the Valdari? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Hyun-Soo nodded. We've been studying Valdari psychology and culture for about 20,000 years. Your species profile is actually quite positive. You show strong adaptive capacity, healthy curiosity about the unknown, and good potential for galactic citizenship. He led them to a section dedicated specifically to Development Zone 47C, where detailed records tracked the progress of every spacefaring species in their region. The Valdari were amazed to see comprehensive files on civilizations they had never even suspected existed. Your neighbors include the Korthani Empire, which controls 15 systems, and the Zalaki Federation, which has achieved faster-than-light travel but hasn't yet developed reliable FTL communication, Hyun-Soo explained. There's also the Nexari Collective, which is about 50 years behind you technologically but shows excellent potential for rapid advancement. The Valdari realized they had been living in a carefully managed environment where dozens of species were developing simultaneously, all unknowingly watched and guided by humanity's vast administrative apparatus. How many of these development zones exist? Vexhai asked. Currently, we maintain about 4,000 active zones across the galaxy, Hyun-Soo replied. Each contains between 50 and 200 developing civilizations, depending on local population density and species distribution patterns. The numbers were staggering. 4,000 development zones meant hundreds of thousands of species. We're going through the same process the Valdari were experiencing. Humanity was simultaneously managing the development of more civilizations than most species could even imagine. Jae-sung, director of the Department of Gradual Integration, met them in the museum's final hall, which was dedicated to successful integration stories. The displays showed species that had made the transition from development zone isolation to full galactic citizenship. The integration process typically takes between 50 and 200 years, Jae-sung explained. It depends on how quickly a species adapts to the reality of galactic civilization and how well they adjust their social and political structures to accommodate their new understanding. He showed them examples of species that had successfully integrated and were now contributing members of galactic society. Some had become major administrative centers, others had developed specialized roles in research or diplomacy, and a few had chosen to maintain quiet, peaceful existences within the broader galactic framework. The choice is always yours, Jae-sung emphasized. Some species prefer to remain relatively isolated even after integration, maintaining minimal contact with the broader galaxy while enjoying the protection and benefits of citizenship. Others dive enthusiastically into galactic politics and commerce. We accommodate both approaches. Kelthran studied the success stories, trying to imagine where the Valdari might fit into this vast civilization. What happens to species that can't adapt to integration? That's extremely rare, Jae-sung replied. In most cases, we can find an accommodation that works for everyone. Sometimes it requires adjusting our approach or providing additional support, but we've learned to be very flexible over the millennia. He showed them records of a few species that had requested to return to development zone status after learning about galactic civilization. We respect those choices as well. Memory adjustment allows species to return to their previous state of development if they truly cannot handle integration. However, less than 1% of contacted species choose this option. The tour concluded in a chamber containing humanity's most ancient historical records, dating back to Earth's earliest space exploration efforts. The Valdari stood before displays showing humanity's first tentative steps beyond their homeworld, amazed that such humble beginnings had led to galactic dominance. The most important thing to understand, Yoonji said as they prepared to leave, is that humanity didn't set out to rule the galaxy. We were simply the first species in this region to achieve large-scale interstellar civilization, and by the time we encountered others, we had already established the infrastructure and institutions needed to maintain galactic peace. As they walked back through the museum halls, Kelthran reflected on everything he had learned. Humanity had been the dominant galactic power since before Valdari civilization had even developed written language. They had watched the rise and fall of countless species, refined their approach to galactic governance through tens of thousands of years of experience, and created a system that allowed smaller civilizations to grow and thrive. What happens now? Kelthran asked as they reached the museum entrance. Now that we know the truth about galactic civilization, what are our options? Jae-sung smiled warmly. Now you get to choose your future. The Valdari can join the galactic community as full citizens, contributing your unique perspectives and abilities to the broader civilization. Or if you prefer, you can return to your development zone and will adjust your memories so you can continue growing at your own pace. But if we choose integration, Vexhai added, we'll always know that we're junior partners in a system that predates our entire civilization. Every species goes through that realization, Hyun-Soo assured him. But being junior partners doesn't mean being less valuable. The galaxy is vast enough that there's room for everyone to contribute something meaningful. 6 months had passed since the Valdari delegation's shocking introduction to galactic reality, and Luna Station had become a second home to Ambassador Kelthran. He stood in his new office, overlooking the diplomatic quarters, wearing the subdued blue uniform of a cultural integration specialist and reviewing files for the next species scheduled to discover humanity's existence. The Karathi Empire had just achieved faster-than-light communication and had broadcast their first message to the galaxy with typical warrior species bravado. Attention, primitive civilizations of the void. The mighty Korathi demand your immediate submission to our glorious empire. Prepare to be honored by our conquest. Kelthrin chuckled as he read the translation, remembering his own people's similarly arrogant first contact message. Administrator Sujin Ryu knocked on his office door and entered with her usual warm smile, carrying the preliminary psychological profile on the Korathi. They sound familiar, don't they? Sujin said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Proud warrior culture, 12 star systems under their control, absolutely convinced they're the strongest power in local space. Sound like anyone you know? The similarities are remarkable, Kelthrin admitted. Though I think we were slightly more diplomatic in our initial approach. The Korathi seem to prefer threats over offers of protection. Sujin had been instrumental in helping the Valdari adjust to their new reality. Her department specialized in species integration, and she had guided hundreds of civilizations through the transition from isolation to galactic citizenship. The Valdari had become one of her most successful integration projects. How are your people adjusting back home? She asked, referring to the broader Valdari population that was gradually learning about galactic civilization through carefully managed information releases. Better than expected, Kelthrin replied. The younger generation is excited about the opportunities, while the older citizens are still processing the scope of what we never knew. Our scientists are particularly fascinated by the research collaboration opportunities. The integration process had been designed to minimize cultural shock while maximizing opportunities for growth. Rather than suddenly revealing the full scope of galactic civilization, information was released gradually as Valdari society adapted to each new revelation. This approach had proven successful with thousands of species over the millennia. The Korathi delegation should arrive within the week, Sujin noted. Would you like to be part of their orientation team? Your perspective might be valuable since you went through the same process recently. Kelthrin had found his new role surprisingly fulfilling. Helping other species navigate the same revelations he had experienced gave him a sense of purpose that his previous diplomatic position had never provided. He was no longer trying to project strength for a minor regional power. He was helping. To build understanding between civilizations, I'd be honored to help, he replied, though I suspect the Korathi will be even more resistant to the truth than we were. Their entire culture is built around concepts of martial superiority and conquest. Ambassador Yejin Nam joined them for their planning meeting, bringing updates from the Sol Defense Fleet about the approaching Korathi delegation. The warrior species had assembled what they considered an impressive battle fleet, 8 warships accompanying their diplomatic vessel, and were approaching. Sol's system with all the subtlety of a meteor impact. Admiral Choi reports that they're broadcasting challenges and demands for single combat on all frequencies, Yejin said with amusement. They seem to believe that diplomatic negotiations should begin with tests of military strength. That will make the initial contact interesting, Sujin observed. How are we planning to handle their escort fleet? Standard protocol, Yejin replied. The Sol Defense Fleet will provide an appropriately impressive welcome while making it clear that aggression won't be tolerated. Once they see what they're actually dealing with, they should calm down quickly. 3 days later, Kelthrin watched from Luna Station's observation deck as the Korathi fleet dropped out of hyperspace and immediately found themselves surrounded by human vessels that made their warships look like toys. The warrior species' aggressive posturing disappeared remarkably quickly when they realized they were completely outmatched. The Korathi delegation was led by War Commander Thax, a being whose massive frame and scarred hide spoke of countless battles. His retinue of subordinates carried weapons and war armor that would have been impressive in any primitive conflict, but looked absurdly outdated in Luna Station's advanced environment. We demand to face your greatest warriors in honorable combat, Thax declared as he disembarked from his vessel. Only through trial by battle can true diplomatic relations be established. Yejin received this challenge with the same patient smile she had shown the Valdari delegation. We appreciate your cultural traditions, War Commander, but we've found that information exchanges tend to be more productive than physical confrontations. Perhaps we could begin with a tour of our facilities? Kelthrin accompanied the Korathi delegation as they received the same orientation that had shattered his own worldview months earlier. Watching Thax and his warriors struggle with the same revelations he had experienced gave him a new appreciation for how far he had come in his own understanding. The Korathi reacted with predictable disbelief when they learned about humanity's galactic dominance. Thax repeatedly challenged the information, demanding proof of human claims and insisting that his 8 warships represented a significant military force that should be respected. "Your vessels are indeed impressive for your technological level," Admiral Choi assured him during their visit to the Sol Defense Fleet headquarters. "However, this single system's defensive grid contains more firepower than your entire civilization has ever produced. We prefer not to think in terms of military superiority, but rather in terms of providing security for all galactic citizens." The broad psychological profiles proved accurate. The Korathi were having even more difficulty accepting their situation than the Valdari had experienced. Their warrior culture made it particularly painful to acknowledge that they were completely powerless in the face of humanity's overwhelming superiority. "This cannot be real," Thax insisted after viewing the galactic census data. "No single species could control so many worlds. You must be deceiving us with false displays and fabricated information." Kelthrin decided to intervene with a perspective that might resonate with the warrior mindset. "War Commander, I understand your disbelief, because I felt the same way 6 months ago. The Valdari came here offering humanity protection, convinced that our 12 systems made us a major galactic power." "12 systems?" Thax scoffed. "We control 16 worlds and have conquered dozens of others. The Korathi Empire is far mightier than any Valdari confederation." "Yes, you're absolutely right," Kelthrin agreed calmly. "Your empire is indeed more powerful than our confederation, but compared to humanity's 800,000 directly administered systems and their defense agreements with millions more, both our civilizations are equally insignificant." The comparison seemed to penetrate Thax's resistance more effectively than abstract statistics. Seeing another proud species that had already accepted their position in the galactic hierarchy provided a model for how the Korathi might adapt to their new reality. Secretary Woo Jin Kim arrived to address the Korathi delegation in Luna Station's main diplomatic chamber. His presence indicated the importance that humanity placed on successful integration, as the secretary rarely met with delegations personally during their initial orientation period. "War Commander Thax," Secretary Kim began, "your species has achieved remarkable things in developing faster-than-light travel and establishing an interstellar empire. Your military innovations and tactical doctrines have been studied by our strategic analysts, and several of your approaches have proven valuable enough to incorporate into our own defensive planning." This acknowledgement of Korathi achievements seemed to ease some of Thax's resistance. The warrior commander straightened with pride as Secretary Kim continued his remarks. "Every species that joins the galactic community brings unique perspectives and capabilities that benefit everyone. The Korathi emphasis on honor, courage, and tactical thinking could contribute significantly to our collective security and diplomatic efforts." Over the following weeks, Kelthrin worked closely with the Korathi delegation as they gradually accepted their new reality. The warriors proved surprisingly adaptable once they understood that joining galactic civilization would provide them with worthy challenges and meaningful roles, rather than reducing them to irrelevance. Thax eventually accepted a position similar to Kelthrin's, specializing in helping other warrior cultures navigate the integration process. His aggressive nature, channeled through proper diplomatic training, made him effective at reaching species that might otherwise resist human guidance. "I never imagined I would find greater honor in helping others than in conquering them," Thax confided to Kelthrin as they reviewed files for their next assignment. "But guiding proud species toward understanding seems more worthy than any battle I have fought." The cycle continued as new species achieved the technological and social development necessary for formal